Greetings, brothers and sisters. This is Sister Sonia here at Last Remnant of God's Army. Thank you so much for joining me here on this channel. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Brothers and sisters, we're going to continue on with Bible study today, and today we're moving on to the book of Leviticus. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. I simply recommend and highly encourage that you start from the very beginning in the playlist, Journey Through the Bible. It has all the valuable information laid out before you, with construction of the Bible, how it was made, and who were the writers and things like that. And we also go through the Bible on a biblical standpoint, on a historical standpoint, on a prophetic standpoint. So this should help you and guide you as you lay down the foundational groundwork as we go through the journey in the Bible. And then when we finish going through the reading of the entirety of the Bible by laying down the foundational stones, then we're going to go forth and reread the whole Bible as a whole again without any repercussions, if you will, so to speak. But very, very, very important to take note of as we go through the Word of God, to get a grasp of what God's plans are, who God is, Yahweh, that is, and to get a better understanding of what his plans regarding salvation entail. Keep in mind his plans for salvation is for everybody, is planned for everyone, alive and breathing. And so we have to learn to think bigger, on a bigger picture scale of things, and learn how to look from the lens of the Most High's perspective. So there are times where we end up looking through the lens of the third person as a witness to what is happening, which he does do that throughout the Bible. So sometimes it'll be from an aerial viewpoint, looking down from heaven onto the earth to see what's going on, as well as at times you're going to see the one-on-one interaction with, depending upon what the situation entails and what's going on in the books. But as we go through the journey of the Bible today, we're going to begin with the book of Leviticus. It's known as the book of the law. Now, the book of Leviticus is a very interesting book because not many people read about it too much, other than a lot of the Jewish scholars and things like that. But today we're going to go over this. This is a quick overview, a summary, before we get into the reading portions of this just for today. So without further ado, let's I'm going to give you an overview and a summary of the book of Leviticus, so that way you don't get confused over it, and we will lay out the foundational groundwork for this book. Amen. All right. So the book of Leviticus is not really the most popular book in the Bible today. However, what we find important about it and why this should be of great importance is something we're going to look at today. So we're going to take a look at what's really important with regards to this book. And it's an often misunderstood book in the Bible. Now, if you're really familiar with the Bible, then you probably already know that the Bible falls into two major sections known as the Old Testament and the New Testament, right? So the New Testament obviously looks at the teachings of Jesus and the teachings of his followers, and then you have the Old Testament, which looks at the relationship between God, Yahweh, and his people of Israel. So Leviticus happens to be the third book within the Bible, and therefore it is the third book that occurs in the Old Testament out of the 5 books, which is known as the Torah or the Pentateuch, okay, or the books of Moses. And these were the foundations of Hebrew faith. And right in the middle of this group of 5 books, we find that the book of Leviticus, now the book of Leviticus, it gets its name from the tribe of Levi. So this is where the name comes out of, which happens to be an ancient group in ancient Israel, was solely responsible for maintaining the temple along with other holy artifacts, as we discussed in the book of Exodus in our last session. And so the Israelites, they had used these holy artifacts and whatnot in order to interact with the Most High Yah, God. And this book happens to be really important and plays a pivotal role in shaping the Levitical priesthood, if you will, because it also tells us the beginnings of that whole story and how the ancient Hebrews had interacted with this rather really powerful being. And so they believed that this was while they were he was dwelling with them on the earth. We're going to see take a look at the structure of Leviticus, and we're going to look at the actual content of the book pretty soon. Now, in order for us to understand why this is such an important book, we need to look at the theme of Leviticus, and which can be summed up by a few simple commands that God tends to repeat throughout the book. So the book is set up with God giving out messages to Moses, and sometimes Moses and his brother Aaron to pass it along to the people of Israel. And it's constantly repeated message from the Most High Yah, which is basically saying, be holy. I am holy, so the people of Israel are also to be holy, just like me. Now, God is holy, but what does the word holy actually mean? Well, holy means to be set apart, meaning 100% set apart away from other worldly cultures, other worldly civilizations, and things like that. And it's to be sacred, if you will, but it's not a common thing. So what the ancient Israelites had believed was that their God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whom we just call in English God, but in Hebrew is called Yahweh or Elohim, or and there are different names. Keep in mind, there are over 99 names. Well, he was very, very holy, and he was completely separated from the world, so that they lived, and he lived. And he was on high above all humans and animals and all the things of nature and all of the gods, the false pagan gods of the nations around the world, and other folks who worshipped. So you might remember in the book of Exodus that when Yahweh rescues his people, the people of Israel, based on the prophecy of Abraham, it was not only just them being rescued from the Egyptians, the people of Egypt, but it was also from the pagan gods of Egypt. And that was the main issue during that time period. So that's what the ancient Israelites had believed, and thus forth. So this is what we are going to find out in the opening of the book of Leviticus, or just right before Leviticus begins, as we read in our last session in the story of Exodus, on how people ought to conduct themselves and maintain a godly lifestyle. Now, Leviticus begins when God has rescued Israel, and he's taken them out of Egypt, and he's led them through the wilderness, as we saw in Exodus, where he has made this agreement with them. And this is like a continuation from the story of Exodus. And so he's made this agreement with them, and right before he makes this agreement, we have this scene on top of a mountain, on the top of Mount Sinai, where he's appearing in this fiery cloud form, and as a pillar of cloud, if you will. And then at the foot of the mountain, you have the people of Israel who are camped around alongside the Most High God as they built the tabernacle, the portable tabernacle. Now, there's yet a great distance between God and the Israelites, and that happens in the middle of the book of Exodus, and that's because the people after hearing the 10 Commandments and receiving God's laws, they immediately broke it. So we see that we have God in this cloud coming down and trying to dwell with Israel's camp. Now, this is a huge, huge thing for the ancient world, because you have this all-powerful cosmic being now living in a tent with regular mortal human beings. This is a very huge thing to consider during those days, as well as we ought to still consider as such today, because we too one day will be dwelling in the house of the Lord. So this is going to be a huge ordeal. And this is a setup, metaphorically speaking, for the millennial kingdom, as we went through the story of Exodus, that God's plans is to dwell with his people. That's the bigger picture of looking at things. Now, so this, again, going back, it was a very huge ordeal for the Israelites to have to deal with this invisible God and learning how to work with him. So what we're looking at in the book of Leviticus is that Yahweh had moved in with Israel, and we have this huge, powerful being that is now trying to coexist along with mortal human beings. That's the Israelites, who are not as holy and not as special and powerful as their God, Yahweh. So Moses makes a tent known as a tabernacle, which was given, the blueprint was given out, as we read in the previous chapters in Exodus, and he makes this portable temple. And this place, this is a place where heaven can actually meet up with earth, where the divine mortal realms can actually overlap. And towards the end of the book of Exodus, we have this problem where Israel breaks their covenant agreement, if you will, with the Most High Yah. And so for them, when they were at the mountain, Mount Sinai, that is. And so that's not very good. So we already have it established that humans have a really hard time with living up to the standards of that of the Most High God. Even Moses himself wasn't even able to enter into the portable temple. So Moses can't even come into this tabernacle in order to meet with the Most High Yah. So this becomes a big problem. And thus we have this very holy being surrounded by unholy people. But by the end of the book of Leviticus, we are going to have the Israelites knowing that some laws that can follow, that can allow them to interact with the Most High Yah and thus live with him in their camp with the Most High Yah. Well, Moses can eventually enter into the tabernacle, and that's a really good thing, because we could see that Yahweh, who's speaking to Moses in the tent of the meeting at the beginning of the text of the book of Numbers, which we will get to later on as we finish this book. That's the next book we'll be reading. And by then, at the end of the book of Leviticus, we have an order of priests from the tribe of Levi. So that tend to maintain a purity of a sort. That's why it says in the Bible, "Be holy as I am holy." So it's a code for coexisting with the Most High God, as we see. So in the book of Leviticus, Israel's purity code for coexisting with their God now, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is very important to take note of. Now, when we talk about purity, it's very closely related to holiness. However, it's not necessarily about being good or bad, but it's rather about being ceremonially clean, and therefore or unclean. And when you are in the presence of the most holy God, you see what the importance of this take place in the book of Leviticus, which happens to be the main core theme: to be holy and to be perfect, to strive to be perfect in every way possible. So the closer the immortal, the closer the immortal gets to God, the more ritualistically pure they are going to have to be in order for them to survive and become a part of God's, sacred holy place. And so because what we see happening in the book of Leviticus is God's holiness consumes impurity, and it also consumes anything that is not ritualistically pure or unclean. So that hasn't made itself sacred to be in the place, in its presence. It just consumes it almost like a fire, if you will. So like kerosene that just ignites real fast. So anything impure and unholy and unclean, or anything that profanes the Most High God, is construed as unclean. God's gonna burn it up real fast. Nothing sinful or nothing of impurity of a sort cannot be anywhere near the Most High. So the holiness of God, he consumes impurity and unrighteousness and things like that real fast, because he can't be anywhere near that. So the Yahweh helps the people of Israel live in his context, because they are they're going to be close to this very extremely powerful being. And in order for them to, survive that, he wants them to be able, he's to look out for them and thus protect them and thus provide for them and guide them through the wilderness. And so they're going to need to set for themselves apart from the rest of the world. And so they need to be ceremonially pure and perfect in every way, at least strive to be, that is. And so they need to be more reverent and obedient towards the Most High, obey his commands and statutes, and the more set apart that they're going to be while living with this holy being, well, that's going to be the setup based off of what we're going to look at in the book of Leviticus as we go through it. So in the book of Leviticus, it's known as a rule book, or the book of the law. And thus, that's exactly what the book of Leviticus is going to show us, because it's Yahweh through Moses and Aaron giving to the people of Israel in various groups, okay, the tribes of Israel, the people of Israel, specific guidelines in order for them to have themselves coexist with in very close proximity, that is, with a very powerful holy God. So that's why what's going on within the book of Leviticus. Now, if you keep this in mind, that then the structure of Leviticus thus becomes pretty straightforward when we start with the rules regarding the Levitical priests, okay? And the priests, keep in mind, they were these mortal individual human beings that went between God and the rest of the human beings. So God's allowing for them ample opportunities to perform their sacrifices and their rituals in a specific manner, as he has shared a little bit of that information in the book of Exodus, but we're going to see more of that unfold as we go through the book of Leviticus. So he's holding these individuals in the Levitical priesthood highly responsible for sacrificing animals, and they're also responsible for performing various rituals that would help and remove uncleanliness from this ritualistic impurity from the people and from themselves as well, and from areas that the world would thus worship, God, and thus meet with God. And so it also helps to it helps people to move forward toward this state of cleanliness or the state of purity, where they see that where many of these sacrifices and burnt offerings and sin offerings show up in various parts in the Old Testament, as we're going to see quite a bit during this section in the first 15 chapters. So Aaron and Moses, who's Moses's brother, he's really has a really terrible day, because Aaron, even though he's inaugurated as the high priest of Israel, that had been set up before, and his sons who enter into the priestly service as well. However, they end up going through a bit of a problem. Now, keep in mind, he has 4 sons, and only 2 of them had survived their priestly duties. Now, the other 2, which we will read about later on, they end up dying because, and I will go back to this for a minute, they die because they don't engage with Yahweh, okay? That is acceptable in such a way So they don't treat him exactly with reverence and respect. And so we're going to see how they offer this strange fire, if you will. Now, what it was is that they no what they just what we see in the book of Leviticus is that they did wrong was that, again, they offered a strange fire. So in other words, they did stuff that they were not supposed to do. They profaned the altar of the Most High God, and therefore they ended up getting consumed by fire themselves for disobedience. Now, there are theories about what it may look like, but just to point out that they were simply in violation of the status of being clean and presentable for a very holy, powerful, Most High God, who was they were supposed to be set apart, and thus being the fact that there were Aaron's two sons. They ended up getting consumed because of what they did against the Most High God as a violation. So they ended up getting consumed by fire, which we're going to see later on. Now, the other two, Aaron's sons who survived, they continued to serve as priests. So we have this setup of a group of people who are designated specifically by the Most High God to go between mortals and the divine human being in order to offer sacrifices and perform rituals, which thus culminates with within the 16th chapter, which thus describes a very, very, very special ritual for ancient Israel. Now, it's known as the Day of Atonement, which happens to be a feast day as well. So we'll talk more about it. I also did videos on holy feasts. So if you check out my playlist, Holy Feasts videos, you're going to see what each of them represents and how it applies to you, whether you're Christian or Jew. It doesn't matter. If you're a believer of the Most High God, you're going to see a deep significance of these holy feasts that are established and how the Most High expects for us to follow these feasts and keep it as a moedid, a divine appointment. But most importantly, we also are going to see, if you look at my videos in those, you're going to see that Yeshua is embedded in all those feasts. And it's truly amazing. Hallelujah. Now, going back to this, we see that this most important specific ritual known as the Day of Atonement, and what this ritual does is that it essentially cleanses you or makes sure that you are preserve the purity of that tabernacle, that tent, that it cleanses the holy place as well. So that place where the Most High Yah and his priests could meet. And so once a year, they pretty much said, well, you've been offering these sacrifices and we've been doing all these things on behalf of the people to keep the people basically ritualistically clean and purified once a year. We're going to do a full sweep, full wipe down, just to make sure that the whole place in the tent of the meeting, the tabernacle with them where the Most High is dwelling, is completely pure and clean 100%, so that any sort of sins or offenses that the Most High Yah has been accounted for. And so when we on this day, we see two goats getting sacrificed. Now, one of them has to die as an offering, as a sacrifice, as a scapegoat, if you will. And the other one has to bear all of the sins of the people, and it thus is tied up with a red scarlet scarf, if you will, and thus sent off into the wilderness. Now, there are rumors, it is believed, however, that when the goats get sent off into the wilderness, some of the Levitical priests go out into different designated areas within the air region to make sure that that goat dies with the sins. And it's a symbolic act, and it is believed that once that goat dies, they light up a torch and they basically wave to the next person, yep, it's all good. And then they signal to the next person, okay, that person said it's good. And it traces all the way back to the tabernacle to let the high priest be alerted and let it be known to them that that goat has, fallen off of a cliff of the mountain and thus forth. They can continue on with their services and whatnot. So very interesting to know about. So going back to this, that's where if you hear people referring to someone as a scapegoat, someone here bears the blame for someone else, well, that's where basically we get this term from. In fact, we've got a scapegoat who's involved in this ritual that cleansed the holy place of the tabernacle. Then and so then in the second half of the book of Leviticus, roughly between chapters 17 through 27, it's roughly known as the holiness code, if you will. And so we've looked at the holy priests, and thus we've looked at the holy place, the tabernacle. Now we have guidelines for a holy set for to become a holy people, the Israelites themselves. So these are basic rules for some of them as a whole nation, and some of them, the rules and guidelines are specifically set for the Levitical priesthood, and basically they spell out the ways in which the people of the Israelites, that is, ought to behave in a more ritualistic and a more pure, godly way, or they can stay more ceremonially clean around the Most High Yah, and then as opposed to the nations that were worshiping other gods. So that's what we see happening here in the standards for, higher, which are much higher for the Levitical priests, because they are solely responsible and they have a bigger responsibility. They have to interface with God the Most High in the tabernacle, and obviously the tabernacle needs to stay very pure and clean in every way possible. So that's why we have this whole that's why we have the Day of Atonement feast ceremony, which which we covered up earlier, and we learn about some also. We're going to learn about some of the most holy feasts that the Most High Yah thus establishes and gives to the people of Israel through Moses and Aaron, who thus teach the people of Israel how to celebrate and worship their God, their new God that they just got rescued by, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Yahweh, and how He has taken them out of Egypt and thus made a dwelling place among them. So this is going to be a really big ordeal for the ancient Israelites. And in this section, we're going to see the people that people need to come to face with the choice that they have to make. And thus what Moses does is basically he says you can choose between the blessings of living in a way that recognizes this holy being in your presence and maintaining purity and righteousness and holiness before the Lord by maintaining the laws, obeying the commandments and statutes. And thus this would bring in the blessings, of course, when you do right by the eyes of the Most High God. You do obey His commands and statutes, which is something I speak of repetitiously a lot on my channel. This for a very emphatic reason, because it brings along blessings. And then He gives the other alternative choice, basically saying that if you choose, so He's leaving the choice up to the people. You could choose to disregard the powerful Most High God that is living amongst you, and you can live at your own peril, and thus risk by yourselves by bringing upon curses of His discipline. And so as well, so you have a choice to choose. You're either with the Most High God or you're against Him, and we're going to see that play out as we go along the books as well. So that's pretty much about it with the book of Leviticus. So this basically, in essence, to sum it all up, it's basically a list of kind of like rules that are going to be applied to everybody, to Moses, Aaron, to his sons, to the Levitical priesthood, to the people of Israel, in order for them to coexist physically with our Creator, the Most High Yah, and in the physical realm. And that's really a fascinating concept, which sparks the need for this book. So I hope that you've enjoyed this mini lesson, the summary of Leviticus. So we are going to begin with this book, Leviticus. We're going to begin with this book of Leviticus, the book of the law, in our next Bible study session. So if you want to, please feel free. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, share, and subscribe to this video. And please share this content with other people, because we need to spread the seeds of hope to other people so that they may understand what is truly going on in the Bible, and to help better prepare themselves as to how to become obedient and holy and set apart from the ways of the world, which is interesting too, because this applies to us even so today. So we want to make sure that we are purely set apart, away from the world, and to be solely focused in on trying to remain as holy, as pure as possible for the Most High God, so that we may be brought into his future tabernacle when he ushers in the millennial kingdom. Amen. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. I hope this has been very helpful for you, very educational for you. And we will pick up reading the story of Leviticus in our next session. Again, if you have not went through the other chapters, or if you missed a chapter, I have all the videos laid out before you. Just click on the Journey Through the Bible playlist, and I have all of the lessons laid out before us, so that way we understand, as we micro-tooth comb the chapters, we're going to and lay down the foundational groundwork. We're also going to examine the plans of the Most High and what he has in store for us. So it's really amazing and fascinating, this book, as even though for a lot of the Christian crowds don't believe that this applies to them, but may I say it applies to you 100% guaranteed, because these are the things that we're going to be putting into practice when we get into the kingdom. We're not going to be celebrating pagan holidays. We're going to be celebrating God's ordained feasts that are for the people. And this is, again, as I mentioned in the holiday videos as well, if you want to take a look at that, I have a playlist for all the holidays, and to demonstrate to you the historical origins of it, how it came to be, what is celebrated, and this, and how we can relate it to today and things like that, and what the scriptures have to say about this. I put it all together for you. So if you want to take a look at that playlist as well, please feel free to do so, because it's very important to know where you stand at the end of the day. And hopefully and prayerfully, everyone stands 100% apart from the ways of the world and moves away from the crowd to follow the Most High Yah, and thus upholds all of the commands and statutes of the Most High. And thus, this is very important to put into practice, because even Yeshua, Jesus, has followed this as well through Levitical laws and so all the sort that the Most High God has established, because he too is the finger of the law as well. So remember, he's the Son of God. He is God, as we see in the Gospel of John and the other Gospels. So keep that in mind. We're going to go through all this, and it's going to be really much more clearer to understand as we go through it. Okay. All right. So that's all I have for you today. God bless you all. Shabbat Shalom to each and every one of you. Happy Friday. And I pray that you all do well. May God bless you. May heaven smile upon you, and may he continue to bless you with everlasting peace. And I thank you all for joining me here today on this channel. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And we continue Journey Through the Bible. This is Sister Sonia here, last remnant of God's army. I thank you so much for joining me here today. We will pick up for Bible study and continue with the book of Leviticus and start a new chapter in here. So all right, that's all I have for you today. May God bless you, and may you have a wonderful, blessed day, and take care. Love you all. Bye.